"My wife's family will live here for a while," said my son, so I moved out, but the next 3 days I came back with, "Yerk? What smell is that? So disgusting!" My daughter-in-law's voice sliced through the quiet like a jagged knife. I was in the kitchen rolling dough for oatmeal cookies, the kind Tommy always loved. Cinnamon and molasses filled the air, warm and familiar, clinging to my hands like memory. I had made these cookies for him every Sunday since he was 2. He was 6 now, tall for his age, full of questions, and always asking for just one more. The voice came again, louder, sharper. "We're finally going to make this place livable," my daughter-in-law declared, dropping throw pillows onto the floor like she was moving into a hotel suite. "No more old lady smell, and get your ancient books out. We're turning your room into a playroom." I froze. The wooden spoon rested in the bowl, its handle sticky with sugar and flour. I stared down at the dough, heart thudding softly, as if the sugar had curdled in my chest. My son stood beside the fridge, arms crossed. He looked older these days, more tired, more evasive. He rubbed the back of his neck and glanced away. "Just let them rearrange a little, Mom," but he mumbled. "It's not a big deal." I said nothing. I turned off the oven. No one noticed. No one looked at me when I set the tray aside. No one asked why I wiped my hands on my apron so slowly, so carefully, as if I were wiping off more than flour. I walked out of the kitchen and down the hallway, each step a little heavier than the last. When I reached my room, the door was already ajar. That was the first thing. The second was the bookshelf. It was gone. Instead, I found splinters of oak scattered across the bed, brass hinges hanging off the side, one of them bent. My books, the ones I'd carried with me through 40 years, were stuffed into cardboard boxes, labeled donation. I leaned closer. Yellow Post-it notes were stuck to the covers. "Smells musty, outdated, trash." There was a black trash bag slumped beside the boxes. I didn't open it, I didn't need to. I turned to the closet. Empty hangers swung like brittle bones. The quilt my mother had stitched by hand, tiny, perfect stitches in lavender thread, was balled up and shoved into a plastic bin labeled seasonal. Behind me, I heard small footsteps. Tommy stood in the doorway with a juice box in one hand and his toy train in the other. His socks were mismatched again. He always lost the blue ones. He tilted his head. "Are you gonna die soon, Nana?" I blinked. He smiled, not unkindly, just curious. "Mom says the baby needs your room." I smiled faintly, though it felt like glass breaking inside me. "Tell your mom," I said softly, "that the room she wants didn't build itself, and neither did the family living in it." I opened my mouth, but the words refused to form. My throat clenched like a fist. He climbed onto the stripped bed and bounced once. "Can I have your rocking chair when you're gone? I like how it creaks." I sat down on the bed frame. The mattress was gone. The springs groaned beneath me. Gone. That's what I was, gone, while still breathing. They hadn't said it out loud, but it was in the way they looked past me, the way they touched my things without asking, the way even my scent, cinnamon, molasses, cedarwood, had become offensive. My room wasn't mine. My chair wasn't mine. Even my smell wasn't mine. It wasn't just about redecorating. It was about being erased, quietly, methodically, as if I were a stain on their new life, as if the woman who helped pay for this house had expired. Back in the kitchen, I heard laughter. A cabinet slammed. Silverware clinked. Someone rifled through the linen drawer. I walked back slowly, unnoticed. They were moving the dining table, the one my husband built with his hands, the one we used every Sunday, even after he passed. They had already taken down my curtains, said they were too dark, replaced them with thin beige panels from some department store sale, the kind that let the sun in but kept nothing out, not the stares, not the judgment. Tommy's juice box was lying sideways on the rug. His toy train trailed beneath the buffet. My daughter-in-law pointed at the wall. "We'll hang the baby's photos here," she said, "and move that old portrait out. It's creepy." I knew which one she meant. It was a framed photo of me and my late husband, taken on our 30th wedding anniversary. I wore navy silk and pearls. He had on a charcoal vest and the only real smile I'd ever seen him wear in a photograph. He hated cameras, but that day he smiled. For me. "It's not creepy," I said softly. "It's my family. She didn't even turn. "We're building our family now," she said. "That was your generation. This is ours." I looked at my son, my only child. He didn't meet my eyes. The cookie dough sat on the counter, slowly deflating. The oven was still off. No one had noticed. I walked to the back door and stepped outside. The roses I planted the year we moved in had gone wild, untrimmed, untamed, reaching for the fence like they wanted to escape. Its branches hung low, stripped of fruit, yet still standing. I realized then it wasn't death that took away its beauty, it was neglect, and neglect, unlike death, is a choice. I knelt beside them and touched the soil. Dry, unattended, like me. A sparrow landed on the fence, chirped once, then flew away. I stood again and walked back in. My legs felt heavier, my heart even more so. I passed through the house like a ghost no one believed in anymore. In the garage, my suitcase was already waiting, dusty, half-zipped. Someone had started packing it. A note was taped to the top in my daughter-in-law's handwriting. "Just for now, we'll figure something out." I didn't touch it. I went upstairs. Back in what used to be my room, I scanned the boxes one last time. One of the books had fallen open. A collection of poems. The page was dog-eared. I read the line, "They buried her while she was still standing." That night, I didn't eat dinner. No one asked why. I sat at the edge of the stripped bed, hands folded, eyes dry. The silence in that room was thicker than grief and deeper than death. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Before this house became their dream, it was mine. And before it was mine, everything I ever had I made with my own 2 hands. Not out of entitlement, not from inheritance, just thread, calluses, and grit. I was a seamstress for 28 years. The shop was no bigger than a single-bedroom apartment, tucked between a barber and a hardware store off Fairfax Avenue. The sign above it was hand-painted, slightly crooked, and the A in alterations had started to fade by the 2nd year. But people came, not because I was the cheapest, but because I listened. I measured with care. I remembered birthdays. I stitched stories into every seam. There were wedding gowns that needed last-minute fixes and Little League uniforms for boys who grew faster than their parents could afford to replace. There were prom dresses, pageant sashes, military jackets, and baby blankets patched with pieces of old shirts. Each thread ran through my fingers like time itself. My husband never liked the shop. He thought it distracted me from my real job, being a wife. He never said it out loud, but I read it in his silences. He worked maintenance for the city, came home smelling of grease and metal, and would eat dinner without looking up from the news. We weren't affectionate, but we endured. That's what marriage was for our generation. Not fire, but endurance. Then he got sick, the kind of sick where hospital bills stack like bricks on your chest and hope becomes rationed by the day. I closed the shop 6 months into his treatment, folded up every dress, gave away every spool, and locked the front door one final time. I sold the sewing machines first, then the counters, then the neon sign. When he passed, there was only $9,400, 0 cents, left in the account. And I knew my son, my only child, was barely treading water himself. 2 kids, a new wife, medical bills of their own, rent rising. He didn't ask for help, he just cried, and I offered. I remember the kitchen table conversation as clearly as I remember my own name. He came over with his shoulders slumped, hands shaking slightly as he poured the tea. "Mom," he said, staring into the steam. "We found a house in East LA. It's old but decent bones. They want $385,000, 0 cents. We can't get approved unless we come up with 20% down." I nodded once. Then went to the cabinet and pulled out the tin box. Inside were 3 things: my marriage certificate, the deed to the shop, and a plain envelope with "Do not touch unless you need it," written in my own handwriting. Inside that envelope was $120,000, 0 cents. Every penny I had saved over 30 years. His eyes widened when I slid it across the table. "Mom, no, I can't take that. That's your future." I smiled. "You're my future." And I said the only condition I had, give me a small corner in that house, a spot with a window, where the sun hits in the morning. That's all I ask. He nodded. I didn't sign anything. I didn't want to. Trust felt stronger than paper back then. We bought the house within 2 weeks. I moved into the back bedroom, the one with light that poured in golden every morning, warming the quilt I had kept from my mother. I planted roses along the side of the fence. I bought a wooden chair for the porch, and every evening I'd sit there with a cup of peppermint tea and watch the neighborhood go quiet as the sky dimmed. They were good years. For a while. I never questioned my place because no one did. I babysat the children when they were small, took them to school, patched their backpacks when the seams ripped. I kept baking cookies. I took over the bills for the property tax so my son and daughter-in-law could focus on raising their family. I kept the receipts in a leather envelope and tucked it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, not because I didn't trust them, but because I trusted the law more. Some habits never leave a seamstress. My daughter-in-law never truly warmed to me. She smiled when guests were around, but there was always that edge in her voice when we were alone, like my presence was a noise she couldn't tune out. I told myself it would pass, that it was hormones, stress, the way new wives want to carve out their own territories. I didn't want to compete, I wanted to help. But somewhere between my helping and their growing, I disappeared. They started calling it their house. She'd say, "We're doing some updates to our space," and never look my way. He started deferring to her even on things we used to decide together. I didn't mind at first. I was old, but not bitter. If a woman wants control of her home, let her have it. But when her home erased me from the walls, from the decisions, and now from my own room, my corner of light, I realized I had made a grave mistake. Not in giving, but in giving everything. The first property tax bill came under both our names. I paid it, then the next, then the next. Every January, like clockwork, I'd walk to the post office, drop the check, and file the carbon copy away. I never told them, they never asked. It was easier that way. But now, standing in a room I no longer recognized, books boxed, curtains torn down, my grandson asking me how long I planned to live, I realized something else. They weren't going to push me out later. They already had. They just hadn't said the words yet, and worse, they thought I wouldn't notice, that I was too old, too fragile, too grateful to fight. But they didn't know that every stitch I'd ever sewn had been a quiet act of defiance, that every inch of fabric held a record of what I'd endured, that I had built a business, raised a son, paid my dues, buried a husband, and still stood tall. I didn't have a storefront anymore, or a sewing machine, or even a shelf left in my room. But I still had the deeds, the records, the receipts, and a heart that had stopped breaking and started remembering. This house wasn't just their future, it had been built with my past, and I hadn't come this far just to fade quietly into their shadows. Not yet. The first sign came wrapped in red and yellow. I was walking home from the market with a small bag of apples when I saw it, a flyer stapled to the bulletin board outside the corner store. Between a dog-walking service and an ad for piano lessons, there it was. Charming 4BR home in East LA, spacious yard, prime location, open house, this Sunday. The photo slapped me like cold water. That was my porch. My roses, the chair I sat in every evening, now digitally brightened to make it look more inviting. I stared at it, heart frozen, until the wind tugged the corner loose and the page fluttered. I tore it down. At first, I thought it must have been a mistake, a misprint, a neighbor's house that just happened to look like ours. But the house number was right there, bold, centered. The house I helped pay for, the house where I wasn't even asked. I took the flyer home and laid it flat on the kitchen table, smoothing out the crumpled edges like it was another bill to pay. The family was out? Perfect. I went to my room, the corner with barely any of my things left, and sat. I didn't cry. I waited. That night, when they came home from dinner, I held up the flyer without a word. My daughter-in-law didn't flinch. "Oh," she said, glancing at it like I'd handed her a grocery list. "Yeah, we've been thinking about it for a while. With the baby coming, we need something newer, more space, better schools." I waited. Nothing more. I looked at my son. "Is this real?" He looked away, scratched his arm. "We haven't finalized anything. It's just exploratory. And were you planning to tell me before or after strangers walked through the house?" That's when she snapped. Her tone turned brittle, sharp enough to cut through bone. We thought you were too old to care. Too old to care. As if age erased memory. As if wrinkles diluted worth. As if the woman who helped buy the damn house was now just an old vase gathering dust in the wrong room. I didn't say anything more that night. I went to my room, my half-packed, slowly disappearing room, and closed the door. But I didn't sleep. And the next morning I began to listen. I moved quieter, made my steps softer. I carried laundry slower, lingered in hallways. I kept the TV off. I started noticing patterns. The way their voices dropped when I entered, the way papers were shuffled away, the way the baby books were stacked higher than my boxes. Then it happened. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I came down to get tea and paused in the hallway. Their bedroom door was cracked open. Inside, my son and his wife were sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by folders, documents, and a laptop. I heard my name. "She's still on the deed," she said. "We can't close unless she signs." "So get her to sign," he said. "She won't know the difference." My heart stuttered. What if she asks questions? "Just say it's for insurance or refinancing. She trusts you." "I don't want her hanging around the new place either." "She won't be. That's the whole point." I felt the heat rise up my neck, but I forced myself not to react. I walked backward, slow, silent, until I reached the staircase. Then I went to my room, sat down at the desk, and pulled out the old phone I kept for emergencies. I hit record. I didn't know what I was planning yet, but something inside me had turned. A thread snapped. The next few days, I played the fool. I forgot where I put my keys. I asked the same question twice. I told Tommy the same story in the morning and again at night. I acted like I didn't notice the empty bookshelves, or the disappearing towels, or the way my suitcase kept inching toward the door. I waited. And then it came. Friday evening. A knock on my door. My son stood there with a gentle smile. In his hands, a stack of papers. "Hey, Mom," he said, cheerful like it was Sunday dinner. "We're refinancing the house. Just need your signature here so the mortgage rate doesn't change." He held out a pen. The stack was thick, too thick for a simple refinance. I smiled at him. "What happens if I don't sign?" He blinked. "It just complicates the process. Nothing bad, it's just paperwork." I took the pen, held it, turned it slowly in my fingers like a knife. "Can I read it over tonight?" I asked sweetly. "You know me, I forget things now. Better safe than sorry." He hesitated. "We kinda need it tonight." I smiled wider. "Then stay up with me. Read it together like old times." He paused, then backed off. "Sure, tomorrow's fine." He left the papers with me. That night, I didn't sleep either. I didn't even read the papers. I didn't need to. Instead, I pulled out my leather folder from the back of my nightstand, the one with the tax records, the deed copy, the original agreement. I added a flash drive with the audio recording. I placed it all neatly into an envelope. Then, I called a number I hadn't dialed in 10 years. "Clara," I said. "It's me. Remember that sewing class I ran in the 90s? Clara, my former student, was now a real estate attorney. "Do you still handle elder co-ownership cases?" I asked. She said yes, and she remembered everything, including the woman who taught her how to hem a line straight, no matter how rough the fabric. The next morning, before sunrise, I got dressed in my best blouse. I put on lipstick I hadn't touched in years. Then I packed that envelope in my purse, because they had made one mistake. They thought I was too old to care. But I had been watching longer than they had been planning, and now they weren't just selling a house, they were selling out the wrong woman. It started with silence, the kind of silence that makes your skin itch before your ears even catch on. When I came home from my walk that morning, the house was too still. No footsteps upstairs, no cartoons blaring, no cabinet doors slamming, just the soft hum of betrayal, waiting behind a half-closed door. I opened it. My room, what used to be my room, was gutted. The bed was stripped bare, the curtains were gone. The quilt my mother had stitched by candlelight, the only thing I'd saved after the house fire in 1964, was nowhere to be seen. The walls were naked, my lamp was missing, the rug, threadbare but still mine, was rolled up and leaning against the hallway wall. I turned to the closet. Empty hangers dangled like broken bones. They hadn't just rearranged. They had erased me. The garage door was open, the sound of muffled voices and movement echoing from inside. I walked slowly, each step heavier than the last, as if my body already knew what my mind didn't want to believe. There, among boxes labeled Christmas and baby keepsakes, were 2 black trash bags and a few dusty plastic bins. One of them had my name on it, not even Mom or Nana. Just my first name, scribbled in marker like I was a stranger. I pulled the lid off the bin. Inside was a wooden box. Oak, polished, carved by my husband's hands on our 10th anniversary. He gave it to me the year we had nothing for gifts, saying, "It's not money that keeps love alive, it's memory." Inside it, I had kept everything that mattered. Letters from him, dried flowers from our wedding, and a crayon drawing my son made in kindergarten. I reached in and lifted the lid. The hinges cracked. The papers were damp. The ink had run. The dried flowers were crushed. One of the love letters was torn in half. The crayon drawing, "Me and Mommy and Daddy at the park," was crumpled and had a black heel print across the middle. I heard a laugh behind me. I turned. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. "Oh, that moldy thing?" she said, pointing to the box. "It was full of rat poop. You should have trashed it decades ago." Her voice was sharp, not angry, just amused. She stepped back inside the house, still smiling. I didn't follow her. I sat down on the concrete garage floor, the cold seeping through my skirt. I cradled the box in my lap, my fingers shaking, but I didn't cry. Not this time. I had done all my crying the year I lost my husband, the year I buried my sister, the year I sold my shop. I had learned the hard way that tears didn't fix what people broke on purpose. Instead, I just sat there, under the open frame of the garage door, as the clouds rolled in above. The sky darkened. Rain began to fall, light at first, then harder. I didn't move. Let them watch from the window. Let them whisper about the crazy old lady in the rain. Let them pretend I didn't hear what I heard, see what I saw, feel what I felt. Because I did. And I remembered everything. I remembered giving my son $120,000, 0 cents in cash, from years of sweat, scars, and stitched fabric. I remembered the clause in the co-ownership deed. I remembered paying every property tax bill, not missing a single one, not even when it meant skipping the new hearing aids or the warmer coat. I remembered teaching my daughter-in-law how to swaddle her first child when she fumbled. I remembered patching their curtains when they tore. I remembered saying, "Take all the space you need," and meaning it. But most of all, I remembered what I'd told my husband before he died. I won't be loud, but I will be prepared. The rain ran down my sleeves. The wooden box grew heavier in my lap, waterlogged with everything they thought they could destroy. That night I took out the folder, the thick, leather-bound one at the back of the closet they hadn't bothered to open. Inside was every tax bill from the last 5 years, every payment receipt, a notarized copy of the deed, a photo of the check I gave my son, a printed version of our original agreement, witnessed and signed. I placed them all into a fresh envelope. Then I opened my laptop. I wasn't good with computers. My hands ached, and the screen was too bright, but I had one name in mind. Clara Thompson. She'd been a teenager when she first walked into my sewing class at the community center. Shy, smart, lost her mother young, wore the same cardigan for months until I stitched her a new one from leftover fabric. She had wanted to become a lawyer even then. I typed her name into the bar. There she was. Clara Thompson-esque, Z.Ec., Family Law, Real Estate, and Elder Protection, Beverly Hills. I dialed the number. She picked up on the second ring. "Clara Thompson." "Clara," I said quietly, "it's Mrs. Alvarez, from the sewing class. Do you remember?" A pause, then a warm gasp. "Mrs. Alvarez? Oh my God, of course I remember. I still have the dress pattern you gave me." I laughed softly. "I'm glad. Listen, Clara, I need your help. I think my family is trying to take something that's not theirs, and I need to stop them, quietly, but completely." She didn't hesitate. "Tell me everything." I did. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "I've seen this before, but not from someone as sharp as you." I smiled. "Oh, honey," I said. I've been playing dumb, but I'm not done yet. That night, I taped the damaged drawing from my son onto the wall above my bed. The crayon lines were faded, the footprint smudged, but it was still there. Still mine, and I wasn't going anywhere. Not until I reminded them all who this house truly belonged to. Clara met me at her office the next morning, a quiet space lined with glass and deep brown wood, sunlight pouring in like truth across the conference table. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 decades, but when she opened the door and called out my name, it felt like we'd never parted. She gave me a hug, real warm, no pity in it, and said, "You don't look any older than you did when I was 15 and terrified of sewing sleeves." I smiled. I still can't sew sleeves right. She gestured for me to sit, brought out a yellow legal pad and a pen, then folded her hands. "All right, Mrs. Alvarez, tell me everything, slowly." So I did. I told her about the money I gave my son, the condition I'd spoken aloud at the kitchen table, that all I asked was a quiet room with morning light. I told her about the deed, the years of property tax I paid in silence, the box in the garage, the smeared crayon drawing, and the flyers I found that confirmed what they were about to do behind my back. But most importantly, I handed her the envelope. She opened it carefully. Inside were copies of the deed, notarized and signed, clearly listing me as a co-owner of the property. My son had never changed it. He'd assumed, wrongly, that I wouldn't remember what was on paper. Then came the tax receipts, organized chronologically, each one in pristine condition, addressed to me, paid by me, and finally, the flash drive. Clara plugged it into her laptop. The audio played clearly, no static, no doubt. My son's voice came through first, sharp and casual. "She won't know the difference. Just get her to sign. We'll say it's a refinancing thing." Then my daughter-in-law's laugh. "She's just taking up space. She'll be dead by next Christmas anyway." There was a pause as the sound of papers shuffled, and my son again. "We need to move fast before she gets suspicious." Clara stopped the recording. Her face had changed. The girl I remembered had melted away. Now, she looked like someone who could dismantle empires. She closed the laptop and looked me in the eye. "You're not just legally protected," she said. "You are still, by all standards, a co-owner of that home. And that recording?" She tapped the flash drive. "That's not just leverage. That's evidence of intent to commit fraud and elder coercion. If this goes to court, they won't just lose the house. They could be investigated." I nodded. "But I don't want to ruin them. I want them gone. I want my house back." Clara smiled slowly. "Then let's do it by the book." She pulled out a folder and began drafting what she called an emergency revocation and protective enforcement order. In plain terms, I was granting her full legal representation and power of attorney over my property share. Effective immediately, this would allow her to act swiftly on my behalf, file motions, send notices, and if needed, trigger civil eviction proceedings. We faxed copies of the deed, the receipts, and the flash drive transcript to the county registrar. Clara submitted an official complaint to the Department of Aging and Adult Protective Services, just in case my son tried to twist the story. Then she pulled out a final document. "This," she said, "is a formal notice of revocation of occupancy consent." I raised an eyebrow. "Sounds fancy." "It is," she said. "It means you no longer consent to your son and his family living in the home because they violated the verbal and moral agreement tied to your financial contribution. And since you never legally surrendered occupancy rights, you can lawfully file for removal through the civil court system." I stared at the paper for a long moment. Then I picked up the pen and signed. In that moment, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like an owner. Clara arranged a courier to deliver the notice to the court and simultaneously sent certified copies to my son and his wife. They would have 24 hours to respond before formal proceedings began. I sat quietly as she reviewed the last few documents, her brows furrowed in focus. Then she looked up, her voice gentler. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Yes," I said simply. She paused. "Even if it means they hate you?" I looked down at my hands, the same hands that had stitched dresses, wiped noses, folded laundry, and handed over envelopes full of money without asking for anything in return. "Honey," I said, "they already do." She didn't argue. By the time I left her office, the clouds had parted. I walked out into the sun holding nothing but my purse and the thin slice of hope that maybe, just maybe, truth still had a place in this world. That night I sat by the window, with the wooden box in my lap. I had cleaned it as best I could. Some of the ink on the letters had blurred, and the drawing was still wrinkled, but I had placed them back in order, carefully, like restoring something sacred. I wasn't naive. I knew there would be backlash, rage, maybe tears, accusations, guilt, tripping, maybe even silence. But silence no longer scared me. I had already lived in silence for too long, watched my space be erased, my presence diminished, my worth negotiated behind closed doors. This time, I had the receipts. This time, I had the law. And this time I had Clara. The next morning, the phone rang just after 8 a.m. It was Clara. "They got the notice," she said. "They're calling my office. I'm not answering yet, but I wanted you to know. We are in the driver's seat now." I exhaled slowly. Then I said the words I hadn't allowed myself to speak aloud in years. "I want them out." Clara replied, firm as stone. "They will be." I set the phone down and walked to the front door. The sun was rising again, same window, same light. But this time, it felt different. This time, I knew I wouldn't be erased. 3 days after I signed the papers, I returned home, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as a woman who had been pushed to the edge and chose not to fall. The morning was clear. The sky held that strange Los Angeles blue that looks painted on, like something too perfect to be real. I stood on the sidewalk in front of the house I helped buy, helped clean, helped keep warm, hands at my sides, shoulders square, heart steady. Behind me stood Clara, sharp in a dark suit, clipboard under one arm. To her left was a uniformed police officer, and beside him, a representative from the civil court, an older black woman with silver braids, reading glasses, and an expression that said she had no time for liars. We walked to the porch together. Clara knocked once. The door opened. My daughter-in-law stood there in leggings and a t-shirt that read, "Mama knows best." She looked from me to Clara to the officer and then rolled her eyes. "What is this, some kind of ambush?" Before anyone could respond, my son appeared behind her, blinking as if still waking up, his hair mussed, holding a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Dad." "Mom?" he said cautiously. "What are you doing with them?" Clara stepped forward. "Mr. Alvarez, I'm Clara Thompson. I represent your mother, who, as co-owner of this property, has filed a revocation of consent and a formal motion for occupancy termination based on coercion and intent to commit deed fraud." He blinked again. "What?" The court officer spoke next. "You've been served. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises unless a formal objection is filed, though, given the evidence we're about to present, I doubt any judge will side with you." My daughter-in-law's mouth fell open. "What the hell are you talking about? She doesn't even own this place." I finally spoke, calm, even. "I paid the down payment. My name is on the deed, and I've paid the property taxes for the last 5 years while you called me deadweight in my own home." She scoffed. "This is insane. This is elder abuse against us. She's not even in her right mind." Clara raised a hand and pressed play on the speaker clipped to her tablet. I had been silent long enough. Silence had cost me my chair, my room, my dignity, but today my words would be louder than the walls they tried to push me out of. The recording played loud and clear. "She won't even remember what she signed, just fake her signature." Then my son's voice, "We need to move fast before she gets suspicious." Then finally her voice, "She's just taking up space. She'll be dead by next Christmas anyway." Silence, complete, total, crushing. My grandson peeked down from the stairs above. He looked confused, holding a teddy bear by one arm. My son turned pale. "Mom," he said, reaching toward me, that's taken out of context. You have to believe me." I looked him in the eye. "I may forget names, but not betrayal." He lowered his hand. Clara stepped forward again. "This home cannot be sold, refinanced, or otherwise transferred without her consent. You attempted to do all three. You used deception, intimidation, and withheld information from a legal co-owner. That's grounds for civil removal and possibly criminal charges." My daughter-in-law snapped. "She's ruining everything. All for what? A tiny room and some stupid old books?" I took a breath, long and slow. "No," I said. "Not for the room. Not for the books. For the principle. For the truth. For every woman who gave too much and got pushed aside the moment she wasn't needed. The court officer stepped forward and handed them each an envelope. These are official notices. You have until tomorrow at 10 a.m. to vacate. After that, law enforcement will assist with removal. Where are we supposed to go? My son asked, his voice cracking for the first time. We have a child, a baby on the way. I didn't reply. Clara did. You should have thought about that before trying to steal from your own mother. We turned and walked out without another word. As I reached the sidewalk, I looked back once. My daughter-in-law was yelling, arms flailing. My son stood frozen, and Tommy, sweet, innocent Tommy, was still holding that teddy bear, watching from behind the staircase railing, silent. The roses I'd planted were still there, overgrown, untended, but alive. Later that afternoon, Clara and I sat at a small cafe downtown. She ordered coffee for both of us, black with 1 sugar, just how I used to make it during our sewing lessons. They won't forget this, she said softly. I hope not, I replied. I didn't do all this to be remembered. I did it to stop disappearing. She nodded. You know, I added, staring at the steam rising from the cup. They thought I was too old to notice, too weak to fight, too quiet to matter. Clara smiled, warm and proud. And they were wrong. They didn't wait until morning. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the realization that once the sun rose, the neighbors would see the sheriff's car parked outside, and everything they had built, the picture-perfect illusion, would come crumbling down. They packed in the dark. I watched from the upstairs window, lights off, curtain drawn only a sliver. The porch light buzzed dimly over the front steps as shadows moved back and forth. Duffel bags, plastic crates, baby gear. The silence was broken only by the low thud of boxes hitting pavement, and the occasional raised voice that cut like glass through the air. Around 11:42 p.m., there was a knock at my bedroom door, a soft one. I didn't answer. It opened anyway. He stood there, still my son, but smaller somehow, older, not from time but from weight, guilt, maybe. He looked like he wanted to say something righteous, something powerful, something that would pull all this back into the realm of forgiveness. Instead, his voice cracked. Mom, he started, swallowing. Please don't do this. I turned toward him slowly, met his eyes without flinching. You already did, I said. He looked down. I didn't know they'd go that far. I thought I could handle it, fix it before it got bad. You were holding the pen, I said quietly. You called the realtor. You sat there while your wife said I'd be dead by Christmas. His eyes filled with tears, real ones maybe, but too late. You let them erase me, I continued. You knew they were gutting my room, throwing out my things. You watched them pack my memories in garbage bags, and you said nothing. I was scared, he whispered. So was I said, and I still stood up. He opened his mouth again, but I raised a hand. Get out, I said gently. Don't beg. It's already done. He stood for a moment longer, then backed away, closing the door behind him without another word. 15 minutes later, someone slammed a suitcase into the front door. The whole house echoed with the force of it. Then came the screaming. My daughter-in-law's voice, shrill and furious, rang out through the hallway. You're heartless, you manipulative old witch. You think this is justice, ruining your own family, throwing out your grandkids? I opened the bedroom door slowly and stepped into the hallway. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, mascara smeared, holding a tangled bundle of coats and a diaper bag. You ruined this family! She screamed up at me. I descended the steps slowly, each footfall firm. When I reached the landing, I met her eyes and said calmly, I gave you a house. I stepped closer. You gave me hell. Do you know what hell really is? I said, my voice steady. It's watching the people you love turn into strangers under your own roof, and realizing you were the one who opened the door for them. Her face twisted. She opened her mouth again, but my son came up behind her and touched her shoulder. Stop, he said, voice hoarse. Just stop. Tommy stood by the front door, small and confused, holding his stuffed bear under one arm. He looked at me with wide eyes, not angry, not frightened, just unsure. I bent down, brushed a curl from his forehead, and whispered, "You'll understand someday." He didn't reply. By midnight, the last bag had been dragged down the steps. The front door slammed once, then again, then again. They couldn't get the stroller to fold right. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm that had already passed but left behind the wreckage. They drove off in 2 cars. The taillights disappeared down the street without a single glance back. When it was finally quiet, I walked through the house. It was strange how loud silence could feel after chaos. The living room was still. Toys half-packed, a baby bottle forgotten on the kitchen counter, a sock wedged between the couch cushions. I walked to the back door and stepped into the garden. The roses I had once tended were overgrown now, wild and unshaped. The porch swing creaked in the breeze. But it was the persimmon tree that stopped me. My husband planted it the year we moved in. It had always bloomed late, stubbornly, like it wanted to prove something. But now, it was withered, branches dry and cracked, fruitless and bent, forgotten. I walked toward it, rested my hand against the trunk. It felt brittle. "Me too," I whispered. The wind picked up gently, lifting the hem of my sweater. Behind me, the house stood still, every light off except one in the hallway, glowing dim through the curtain. It looked empty, but for the first time in years it didn't feel like it. Because now, there was no fear in the walls, no weight in my chest, no eggshells underfoot, just space. Real space. Mine. I went back inside and turned off the last light. As I walked through the now quiet rooms, I didn't think about their shouting, or the slammed doors, or the empty apologies. I thought about the little girl I once was, who dreamed of a home with windows that let in the morning light. And I thought, after all these years, I had finally returned to it. I sold the house 2 weeks later. The market was hot. Everyone wanted East LA, with its promises of character and charm and potential. Funny how no one could see its value when I first helped pay for it. But now, it went for twice what we bought it for. A cash buyer, no haggling. I didn't blink. The proceeds landed in my account with the kind of zeros that could have padded a retirement, paid for cruises or long weekends in wine country, but I didn't want any of that. I wired it all into something better. A foundation. Widows with Worth. A name I chose on purpose. Not because I saw myself as a victim, but because I had met too many women like me in quiet laundromats and community centers, sitting on metal chairs with hands folded in their laps, swallowing their sadness, while their children made decisions around them like they were already ghosts. We help women over 60 get legal representation, housing support, financial counseling. We don't give pity, we give power. Because when a woman has given everything and still gets erased, she deserves not a handout, but a second beginning. Just like I had. I bought myself a new beginning, too. A small house near the coast, just north of Long Beach. Nothing fancy. Just 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a porch that faces the morning sun. There's a salt wind that comes through every evening, brushing the curtains and cooling the tile floors. At night, I can hear the ocean breathing, soft and steady, like an old friend finally at peace. The day I moved in, I carried only a few things. A worn wooden box, a bag of clothes, the envelope with my deed and documents, and a tin of rose clippings. I planted the roses on my first morning, beside the front fence. The soil here is different, sandier, looser. But I dug deep, placed the roots with care, and whispered to them, "We've got room now. You don't have to fight anymore." Then I hung the sign. I carved it myself with a borrowed knife and an old cedar plank I found at a flea market, stained it with linseed oil, hammered it into the post beside the mailbox with my bare hands. It reads, "This house was funded by a burden. Enjoy the silence." Some days, neighbors ask about it. I just smile and say, "It's personal." They nod. They don't push. I've made friends with the woman next door. Her name's Louise, divorced, retired math teacher, great with succulents. We share coffee on Sundays and complain about how loud the seagulls are. I think she knows, deep down, that I've lived through something, but she's kind enough not to ask unless I'm ready to tell it. Inside, I kept only what mattered. One of those things was a drawing, crayon on yellow paper smudged in the corner. A stick figure version of me with curly hair and arms too long, standing beside a boy in a red shirt with big, lopsided eyes. in blocky handwriting at the bottom, "To Nana, you make everything warm." Tommy gave it to me when he was 4. They had packed it in a trash bag. I had pulled it out before the movers came, smoothed it flat, pressed it between 2 cookbooks during the night, and tucked it in the side of my suitcase like a heartbeat. It's taped to my refrigerator now, right next to a grocery list and a coupon for canned peaches, and every time I pass it, I touch the edge, like lighting a candle. I don't know if Tommy will remember me the way I remember him. Children forget things quickly, or they're taught to, but that drawing, that memory belongs to me, untouched, undeniable. Sometimes I get letters from women in Texas, Ohio, Montana, women who saw the story Clara quietly leaked to the local news. Elder woman reclaims her rights after deed fraud attempt by son. They write things like, "You gave me the courage to say no. I filed for co-ownership of my house this week. I left the room they told me to die in." I keep those letters in a blue folder beneath my desk. I don't reread them often, but I like knowing they're there. Proof that silence doesn't have to be the end of a sentence. I never spoke to my son again. Not because I hate him, but because I love myself more. He made his choice, and I made mine. Some lines, once crossed, don't get redrawn. They just stay there, etched into the ground like a property line no one can pretend not to see. Every now and then, when I'm out watering the roses or sitting on the porch with my coffee, I think about the house on El Camino Street, the one I helped build, the one they tried to take from me. I wonder if it ever stopped echoing after we left. I wonder if they hear my voice in the floors. And then I let it go. Because this house, this little home with salt in the air and sunlight on the sill, is mine. Truly mine. It was paid for with dignity, carved from memory, and built not on guilt or fear, but truth. And that, I've learned, is the strongest foundation there is. I built that house with love. I left it with truth. And I live now with peace. Thank you for staying with me until the very last word of this story. If you believe that grandmothers, strong, quiet women who were overlooked but never powerless, deserve to be heard, then don't forget, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional, powerful, and deeply human story from grandmothers across America. And if you've heard or lived a story that's never been told, share it with us, because here, every grandmother has a voice. Grandma True Stories, where her silence becomes a story worth telling.